So the abuse that I experienced as a kid wasn't necessarily abuse that I took personally. The majority of the impact on my life through domestic abuse was with my mother. As a young kid, my parents divorced when I was really young. My mom remarried, and the guy that she married was, for the most part, a great guy until alcohol became involved. And so what would happen would be that it usually would start with drinking. Back then, you know, they used to go out a lot. They used to go out and entertain, or go to bars, or go to different events, and it seemed that the alcohol was always pretty much the foundation of a lot of what everybody did to have a good time. So what I remember pretty vividly is them getting ready to go out. To this day, the smell of Aquanet hairspray kind of just reminds me of when my mom used to be getting ready to go out. And we kind of all knew what would happen. They would go out, they'd eventually get in a fight when alcohol was involved. She would always come home before him, and after he would follow her home, after what was 9 times out of 10 an argument, the fight was on. And you know, he wouldn't just come home upset. He would come home pretty much to terrorize. I think he had a lot of emotional issues that he had to deal with through his life, and a lot of demons inside, and those demons really came out with alcohol. My mom would come home first. My stepdad would follow, and then I remember he used to turn on every radio in the house, turn the TV on full blast. He wanted everyone to know that he was home and trouble was brewing. I remember laying in bed as a kid, just waiting for the fight to start. You'd hear arguments, and then bam, boom, bang, it would get physical. It wasn't just that he would slap her. It wasn't just that, you know, he would be verbally abusive, but for the most part, it would be a pretty good beating. And you know, I never experienced the abuse personally towards me. He never hit me. But at the time as a kid, I don't know what's worse. At that age, I just remember my mom was everything. If you wanted to hurt me, you could hurt my mom, and that would pretty much do it. So to be able to make those observations as a kid, to watch your mom get pummeled, to watch her be beaten at the hands of a violent man who'd been drinking, you know, it had its impact. A lot of scary nights. I remember, you know, most of the time, if there was one emotion that I had to deal with on a regular basis, it was fear. It was fear of the unknown, fear of what was going to happen. You kind of knew how the night was going to turn out, but you never knew how bad or how far it would escalate. So, you know, as a little kid, having that fear and watching that one thing that you love more than anything abused and hurt and beaten violently has a pretty lasting impact. I remember it would be so repetitive that myself and my sisters would try to convince my mom to leave the house, don't wait for him. So there were many nights that we stayed in hotels, we hid to try to find places to go that we knew that he wouldn't find us. But most of the time, convincing my mom to leave the house was not very successful. So we would wait, and the fight would be on. So it was, you know, pretty difficult situation, running for help, going to get help, trying to get somebody to help your mom. I was too small as a kid. There's nothing really that I could do, but when it became to a certain point, we would burst out the door and go to try to find help. 9 times out of 10, when the police would come, he would just turn his violence from my mother straight to the police, which 9 times out of 10 would result in him being arrested, going to jail, and then as sure as anything, he would get out, he would be forgiven, rinse, repeat, start over again. So that was the big impact and the abuse that I witnessed as a kid, which, like I said, having not endured the physical abuse personally was something I did not have to endure, but watching your mom be beaten to a pulp, bloody, where she ended up in the hospital was something that had a pretty big impact on my life. So with regards to the signs that others would notice for the violence that took place in my childhood, and the people that we came across, I would say for the most part, the signs were big and bright. Probably, I would say, neon signs. When a fight took place, it became pretty violent. And as a kid, and knowing what the results were going to be, the first thing I would contemplate was to go get help. And so when the fight started, I would always try to pick the right time to go. You never wanted to run and get help too early. I think I did on one occasion. An argument started and I panicked and ran out the door to get help. But for the most part, it was when the fighting started, I would run out the door and I would head straight to a neighbor's house. And I think over the course of I don't know how many years, I had gone to every single neighbor, 2 doors each way and around, and I could probably sit and point out every house that I'd probably gone to on the entire block at least one occasion, and sometimes return to the same house just trying to get help. There was a bit of embarrassment having to run to your neighbors to get help, so I would always try to pick a new neighbor to go to, but it was pretty obvious on the street, it was pretty obvious to everybody in our community what would go on. And like I said, if the police would come, then a pretty violent altercation would take place, usually with the police as well. And so there were major signs. Personally, what people knew about me personally, what I was enduring at night, what I was having to experience with my mother being abused, I think pretty much everybody knew. And I think it was the elephant under the rug that once the same individuals that were involved in fighting weren't drinking, they were good people. They were nice people. They were the type of people that I think everybody wanted to have as your friends and family. But when the drinking came out, it was when things exploded, when things would get violent. So in my situation, my experience, there were pretty big signs that things were taking place. It eventually affected pretty much every part of your life. It would affect your schoolwork, it would affect your relationship with your family, with your mother, with that individual. It just seemed that once the drinking started and once the sorries started to come, that forgiveness was quickly granted. And even in the case where he would get arrested, his stature in the community prior to and knowing a lot of the police officers and knowing the judges and being a fisherman, he would usually show up to the court appearances with a big salmon or some kind of gift to give to somebody he knew to try to get off the hook. And I know that laws today are a little bit more stricter than they were back then, but it seemed like a pretty sure thing that he would get released. He would be forgiven. And I know it's probably even more difficult to prosecute or to pursue charges on somebody when the victim themselves are apologetic for that person, are forgiving of that person, or quite honestly just dependent on that person for livelihood, their livelihood, the livelihood of your children. And so, I know that in addition to light sentences that the abuser would receive, a series of 8A meetings would always be prescribed as well. So as a kid, I actually remember sitting through AA meetings on a regular basis. I could probably host a meeting at 12 or 13 years old. I had been to so many. But I think because they were court ordered and not voluntary or not something that anybody really wanted to attend, it was more or less just get through it. And I don't know that it really that it offered much help in the situation that we were in. So I think just about everybody that knew our family, knew them, knew us. There were some pretty bright neon signs to what was occurring.